And then maybe the other thing, holistically, is fighting apathy. How do you get somebody from not caring to being engaged? And that's really hard.
Yeah. I think there will always be people that don't care. There will always be suicide. There will always be murder. There's going to be all these problems that are natural and created by civilization.
Maybe we should send you to school, Drogo, for community organizing, which is a psychology-related field. You just learn how to be a community organizer. You go into a community, you find what issues are important, you have meetings, you discuss it, you form a platform, you get people involved, you try to get people into leadership positions to mobilize other people, and pretty soon you have a movement pulled together.
Well, I've been involved in a lot of
which you're probably already doing.
Yeah, my father was mayor of Harper's Ferry. I was on the Historic Landmarks Commission. I was Vice Noble Grant of the Odd Fellows.
I guess at that point you get to a point where you have an opposition, and how do you defeat your opposition when it may be overwhelming in power, money, and resources?
One of my techniques has been to not overemphasize my own identity in favor of trying to bring in eclectic points of view to support the eclectic wisdoms that I've valued, that the SCOD theory values. Rather than have a figurehead demagogue, I would prefer to have more organic, democratic, multiple visions of SCOD that then create a humanity on the planet that works more in tune with nature, so that the movement becomes totally oriented to the people involved. And that should be the driving force, is every individual's purpose. And there's going to be a little apathy, and that's always going to be the problem with any system, is there's always going to be people that are like, oh, I don't want to do that, blah, blah, blah. But why is there capitalism? I think eventually, enough people were thinking in that way that it became, and the ways of civilization evolved into that because of mass thinking. And so, why did communism fail? Well, the people winning the wars were capitalists. People were saying, look what the bad communists did, and not enough people were saying, look what the bad capitalists did. So I think it's sort of like, it really depends on what overall most people are thinking.
Well, whether you're capitalist or communist, I mean, mild versions of both kind of work, I think. But...
And they're loaded terms. So we have a linguistic problem every time we try to address issues, because the words are so loaded. What one person views as good, another person will say that's evil. So
you've heard me say before that I think we need to turn everyone's emotional intensity from a 10 down to like a 2.
Right on.
And be really pragmatic about everything.
So
but there are people who won't. And the question is, how do you get around people like that? And I'm not sure there's really like a clear answer.
So I think more of us need to start talking about why we might like alternative communities, or why we might like farms, or why we might like farming, versus why we don't like the commuting, why we don't like urban sprawl, why we don't like these things. And if they're true, then we will keep repeating this until change happens. I mean, if we're all so discontent and we just keep overpopulating the planet and we keep polluting the planet, I think nature will correct itself, and there will be mass extermination, and the apocalypse will happen. If people just say, oh, it's all going to hell, let's just continue suffering and whipping ourselves.
That's the bottom line. Either we're going to unite in this unity consciousness movement. We will all realize we're all together in this, and we don't need all these negative things, and stop putting energy into it. Or we're eventually on the road to some cataclysmic event, and how and where and under what circumstances that's going to occur remains to be seen.
Yeah. So Scott has always assumed that there could be an apocalyptic event, but that there doesn't have to be. So, in other words, does the threat of an apocalyptic event, should that be the reasoning why we do or do not do something? And I was arguing that respect for the environment, not polluting the planet, environmentalism and preservation should be done regardless of whether we ruin everything or not, regardless of whether there's going to be a collapse of the system or not. So in other words, what do we want the future of the system to be? Let's assume the system continues and we're going to still have electricity supplied from some type of grid, and we're going to have the basics of the system continue that runs the globe as civilization we know it. Do we want to continue the way the way that we have been, or do we want to change more as we are starting to?
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, you can add, oh, by the way, we might also, destroy ourselves if we don't change. But that doesn't even have to be part of the...
The good thing about that is with our globalism and with our technology and connectedness through the internet, more discussions are taking place like this. This discussion that we're having now can get duplicated and duplicated and duplicated
And it should be.
and expanded.
Yeah.
And I think that's happening more and more and more and more. And, change is slow to come, but that's where we have to put the energy into.
Yeah. I would hope that we'll become less concerned with fashion and less concerned with criticizing other individual things that don't matter that much, and more focused on what we have in common, what we like, and how we are moving towards making progress and producing things that are significant and mean something good to us and make us happier and more successful. Because if we're not focused on happiness and success and we focus on criticism, it seems like you create a pattern of negativity where you're just going to, the meaning of life becomes to criticize and destroy and deconstruct.
Right. Criticize without seeking understanding.
Yeah.
Criticism has its place in a sense, where you want to criticize.
It does.
Or not criticize is not the wrong word, but
in other words,
you're trying to improve it.
What is worth criticizing? That's what I want to focus on. In other words, I think it's worth criticizing things that are destroying the planet, like they're not destroying the planet for us. So in other words, mountaintop removal. I think it's worth criticizing mountaintop removal.
Right.
I think it's worth criticizing dumping things in rivers that kill people or make people sick and kill wildlife. I think it's worth criticizing cutting down large amounts of trees.
Should SCOD focus its energies on information, transmissions of information, or should SCOD focus on actually physically building a model of development for what things should be? What would be the better value for you going in either direction?
Like
if you
I
had
say,
to choose one. Which do you think would expand SCOD more? If you created a better flow of information or building a SCOD community?
It's like saying, would you rather have drink or food? You need both. So I do both, and I've been doing both, and I think both have to be done. So it's like, would you rather breathe or consume food?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you need to do both. That's what we need to do information. And,
right.
And so, but certain people are able to focus on information better than others. Right. Some people are able to communicate better than others.
Let me.
Then they should focus.
Let me rephrase my question.
They should focus on that.
You have 100% of your energy. How much of a percentage of your investment of energy should go into each one that I had mentioned before? Would you invest more energy into flows of information or more information of building a model, a real physical model? I'm not just talking about you drawing on a piece of paper. Right. I'm talking about a house and a development being built contrary to, what exists.
I've been trying to live my life according to the values I've been putting into SCOD. So in other words, in the town of Harpers Ferry, which is a corporation in a government, it's a government and a corporate. In other words, an incorporated town is both a corporation and a government.
Right.
And so to be a resident of that within a national park is actually pretty unique. And so I've been studying that my whole life, of how there's different players, there's different factions involved, and how best to get along with the factions as needed. So if I have a crisis of a leak, the water department needs to come and fix it, my priority becomes the water department. Mm-hmm. If I have a problem with a neighbor, my priority becomes dealing with that neighbor.
Right.
So I think it's triage. It's like maintaining what's critical, prioritizing.
So what would get you out of crisis mode for you to be able, if you got to a point where I'm able to focus, I'm comfortable enough without having day-to-day issues interfere with everything, like putting out fires of different causes, and I had time to direct my energies towards things, would there be some places where you would focus more or less? That would be, and I think that's the question that we're asking.
Yeah.
What's most effective
Right.
to advance it? What would you do? What would you be investing your time and energy
You're saying at this point in time, right now.
Right.
I would love right now to come up with $500,000 and build a fresh community on,
right next to a development, and then have all sorts of marketing material saying, we're unlike that piece of shit next door. Come to us. Look at this, what we have.
Ideally, I'd like to have $1 million so I could take $500,000, buy off all the politicians to change the laws, to change the zoning, because you need to change the zoning to accommodate for alternative communities, alternative building methods, because they're illegal currently. So there's a lot of problems with the system, why I haven't been able to implement SCOD. You need the financing, you need to change the laws.
Yep.
So if I could get $1 million and buy the people off to change the laws, I would do that. Then I would spend the other $500,000 on building the buildings and advertising to attract people there. Then we would set up, I would work with people on the business aspects on how to maintain, how to sustain it, sustain it.
So on one level is targeting the person who has the power to change the zoning and the political aspect of it, and then trying to become that person. The second possibility is creating the vision of it and the diagram of what would be. Like, say, you draw up, take this development that we are in right now, you draw up an alternative development and really make it comparable to what this is, but in your style, and then promote that, which you can do for free. This is what the next development should look like, and promote it in a grassroots effort, which may or may not work, because you're fighting power.
Brilliant. That's brilliant. Pugin did that to advocate Gothic architecture. He showed industrialization of the 1800s and versus. He would show all the chimney stacks and the pollution and what the skyline looked like, and then beside it he would put Gothic spires, and he said, which do you prefer? And so that's a brilliant way of doing it,
That would be the most easiest way to go. Would be, if you want to create something, you have to create the vision of it and market it out, and then placate everybody with it.
So in my videos,
which you're
I've done
already
that.
doing.
So for example, I ran around a farm with the video camera saying all this farmland is being threatened.
Did anyone care? No one cared.
Well, I feel like it's a body. When, as an artist, you have a body of life's work, it may not be acknowledged even after your death. You have to decide if you still want to do it.
Yeah.
I've decided I'm still doing it. I don't give a shit. So I make these videos, and I talk about. So I'll show the row houses. I've been doing this. I'm trying to get people to think a little bit ahead. And in the present, would you like be more nature oriented with nature, or would you rather have the city? And a lot of people would still rather have urbanization and city pollution with its pollution because they prefer technology. So
I guess we're on a path to despair where people are just going to.
I'm not anti-technology, so
destroy. We're just going to destroy the earth until we can't anymore, and they'll be, like you said earlier, the nature's just going to overcome us.
I would prefer urbanization that incorporates technology with. So in other words, in cities, you have high-rises. Put the trees in. Put the photovoltaics. Let's get the energy from the sun. Let's get the energy from the wind. Let's get the energy from the stream going by, the river, and then whatever else. So in other words, cities can have their own form of SCOD architecture. Currently, it's called environmentalism or green.
Right.
But that's one aspect of what SCOD is. So the other aspects, social aspects. And validating other ways of the cultures and ways of life.